new WBC Flyweight Champion of the world, and his name is Juan Churritos Hernandez Navarrete. Managed to pull off a little bit of an upset with a third round TKO over Nawaphon Kaikanha, aka Nawaphon Porchokcha, aka Nawaphon Nakonlong, depending on exactly which fight and who's sponsoring him at the time. I believe this fight he was actually billed as Nawaphon Nakonlong when they actually entered the ring. But it was really a solid fight. Definitely, I think one of the more competitive, just like championship fights, probably of 2017. Early on, they both started pretty fast. Churritos Hernandez is known to be a pretty quick starter, very quick hands, very quick feet. I've compared him in the past to being almost a similar skill set to Carlos Cuadras or Saul Juarez. Two fighters in the general weight range. Juarez plays straight at 105 and Cuadras, of course, at 115. Churritos at 108, or excuse me, at 112 here now. He used to fight at 108. He actually used to fight at 105 as well. His first title shot came against Kazuto Ioka back when Ioka was the 105-pound champion. I think it was actually just before he was unified. I think he was only the WBC champ at the time. But in any case, he managed to fight his way back into world title contention, albeit at a higher weight, 2 weight classes above. And he had been doing a really solid job, scoring pretty impressive knockout victories over pretty highly ranked competition. Former champions like Ramon Garcia Herales, guys like Jesus Silvestre, Omar Nino Romero, another former champion. Guys who were maybe a little bit past it, but still guys that you wouldn't expect somebody who tends to be a bit more of like a finesse and speed boxer to be just ripping into him and knocking him out as early as he had been. But Hernandez was doing a really fine job, and he definitely did so in this fight as well. Like I said, he started pretty quick in this fight. Was early on looking to switch stances a number of times. He's a guy that's very prone to switching stances several times in a round. He'll go southpaw to orthodox, southpaw to orthodox. A lot of times he'll finish up with his punch with himself in the opposite stance that he started in, and then he'll start throwing combinations from that stance as well. A very ambidextrous fighter, probably one of the better fighters in the game today that's able to really pull that off. And he's very quick-handed. Was throwing the 1-2 uppercut quite frequently in the beginning and catching Kaikanha by surprise pretty early on. But after a little while, Nawaphon, it seemed like being the taller, just bigger man. He's probably about 5'6", 5'6.5", compared to Churritos Hernandez's 5'2.5". So he definitely had a pretty large height advantage as well as a reach advantage. And he was looking to put that to use as he kind of stalked Hernandez and looked to really land, especially the big right hand. It didn't quite do as much body work in this fight as he had in the past. Tends to be a bit more of a body killer, and then he'll crush you to the head after he does the work to the body. But I think it's just a matter of the fact that Hernandez was so quick and fleet-footed that he was finding it difficult to really catch up to him and really pull off the combinations that he's normally prone to do. So Nawaphon he tended to be forced to be a bit more one shot at a time and really shoot the straight jab and then the right hand behind it. The basic 1-2 basically. But he's very good at doing that as well. And he did, close to the end of the first round, start managing to land a few of those right hands fairly solidly. It seemed like he was just off the mark, just a tad. And overall, I thought Hernandez really landed the cleaner work in the first round. And Nawaphon's was a little bit few and far between, as well as being a little bit too close to the end of the round, whereas Hernandez seemed to kind of dictate the pace of the fight, as well as the ring general throughout most of that round. The second round, it started off pretty much where the first left off. Nawaphon was looking to stalk and land the huge right hand. Hernandez was looking to, be tricky, be quick, be slick, try and, pull off the kind of like swim without getting wet, jump inside, rattle off combinations, jump outside, be tricky, show off different looks, different angles of punches, almost like that Yuriorkis Gamboa type of improvisational style that he has. And he was doing that fairly effectively, but at the same time, Nawaphon was able to find a pretty good home for the right hand, just shooting it straight up the middle. Because whether he was in the orthodox or the southpaw stance, but especially when he was in the southpaw stance, it seemed like Nawaphon was able to find a good home for that right hand. Of course, a lot of people know that one of the big boons, one of the best punches to use against a guy that's in a southpaw stance is that straight right up the middle. You can a lot of times catch a guy almost like blinded to that shot very frequently. And Nawaphon was able to not quite catch Hernandez blind to the shot, but was able to catch him a bit more cleanly when he was in the southpaw stance as opposed to when he was in the orthodox stance. But, Hernandez didn't let that deter him. He kept switching up, kept varying up his punch variety, shooting a very sneaky left uppercut. When it's like almost like he would feint throwing a hook, but he would turn it into a left uppercut, almost like an old Roy Jones move that he would frequently do, where it's like he would be all the way on the outside and he'd be looking to throw almost like a leaping check hook, but he would like turn it into an uppercut at the last minute. He managed to catch and momentarily stun Nawaphon a couple of times during the round. But overall, I thought Nawaphon actually did the more consistent work in the second round. I thought the clean right hands were landing pretty well leveraged, and I edged the second round to him. So, through the first 2 rounds, you have pretty much an even fight. Third round, I thought was a bit more of the same, pretty evenly matched all the way throughout the entire fight. Nawaphon looking to measure off the 1-2 and just the sharp, well-leveraged hard power shots, whereas Hernandez was looking to try and catch and stun Kaikanha with his hand speed and foot speed, trying to razzle-dazzle him, so to speak. And eventually, after what was a minor break in order to try and clean off the Nawaphon Kaikanha's corner because it looked like they had spilled a bunch of water over in the corner and Hernandez was slipping on it. The ref called a quick break for a second, wiped off the corner. They went back in action, and Hernandez really almost took advantage of the fact that it seemed like Nawaphon wasn't quite ready to get back into gear. It's like Hernandez leaped right at him and started really attacking a lot more, vehemently. He was a lot more relentless with his attack and with his overall hand speed and the combinations. And it seemed like that actually kind of worked a little bit better for him because he jumped in, launched a pretty fierce attack against Nawaphon. Nawaphon was looking to counter. He wasn't quite landing though. He was missing a little bit. And then it's like Hernandez stepped back, and then just as Nawaphon was about to get his bearings, he threw another one of those shots that I was just talking about. The left hook turned into a left uppercut, and he caught him completely by surprise by the shot. It seemed like Nawaphon was almost like blinding himself to the shot because he had up a high guard looking to try and block the left hook. He put his left hand up specifically to block the left hook, but that left hand came up from the underside, clocked him right on the jaw, snapped his head back, and he was pretty badly stunned from that shot. Hernandez followed up, managed to land about 3-4 more power shots after that, and managed to drop Nawaphon. Nawaphon did get up. He probably got up around the 5 or the 6 count. He had his gloves up in the air. He looked like he was okay to continue. But just as soon as the ref called him to keep on fighting, to box on, Hernandez ran across the ring and just relentlessly attacked him, in furtherance. And he started to land, even cleaner, harder, and just quicker shots, even beyond what he had initially landed after their first initial break in order to dry out the corner. And he caught him with a clean left hook around the guard, a clean uppercut underneath the guard, a good right hand a couple of times, either to the chest or to almost like the neck jaw area. Wasn't quite that pinpoint accuracy, but definitely hard, fast shots looking to really do damage. And just in the flurry, Nawaphon, he managed to get his head snapped back a couple of times. And in spite of the fact that Nawaphon was throwing back a little bit here and there, it seemed like the ref jumped in because of the overall accumulation of punishment that he was taking, as well as the fact that he had gotten his head snapped, I guess, basically one too many times in the midst of that follow-up flurry after being knocked down. I would have liked to see it go a little bit longer. I thought the ref maybe stepped in just a little bit too soon. But, it was a judgment call. He was taking a whole hell of a lot of shots and really not landing very much in return. He was throwing back in return, but really not landing cleanly or really much at all. It's like he was just kind of throwing back reflexively, but he was eating even harder shots in the midst of throwing back. So with that, Hernandez managed to stop Nawaphon Kaikanha in the third round. Very, very good win for him. Of course, Nawaphon had come into this fight at 36-0 with 28 knockouts. He had looked like, somebody that might be a fairly tough opponent for anybody and everybody at flyweight or even at super flyweight should he have happened to have moved up. And even I was predicting that he might move up and potentially be a future opponent for somebody like a Inoue or Roman Churritos Gonzalez. But it just shows that there's levels to this game, and in spite of the fact that Nawaphon was absolutely crushing and demolishing a lot of the guys at the lower levels, like pretty much like the more domestic Thai or South Asian level once he stepped up to the world level, it looked like he just was a little bit of a fish out of water, but not entirely. Because honestly, I thought he was doing pretty solidly up until the stoppage. Even in that third round, I thought he was actually slightly winning the round up until Hernandez managed to land that brutal shot and drop him in the follow-up flurry. So Nawaphon had shown himself to be a pretty tough opponent. Almost similar to some of the recent fights that we've seen, where it's like a guy managed to show himself to be a difficult opponent, but eventually he got knocked out. Brings to mind like the Jamal Charlo versus J-Rock fight, Julian Williams fight. Williams was proven himself to be a pretty difficult opponent, but eventually, just the power and the skills, the technique, it was a little bit too much for him. Maybe at the size as well. Here it tended to be a bit more the speed, just the explosive hand speed and tricky foot speed of Hernandez that just managed to catch Nawaphon by surprise. Otherwise, if the fight had gone on a bit longer, it might have been the tides might have turned back in Nawaphon's direction. But you definitely have to give Hernandez credit. He advances now to 34-2 with 25 knockouts. Of course, one of those losses that came way earlier in his career, way back in 2005, 2006, I believe. And then the second one was way back in 2011 to Kazuto Yoka in his very first title shot, way back in 105. Be really interesting to see if he could actually get a rematch with Kazuto Yoka, since they're both champions at flyweight now. That'd be a very good fight, a unification between the WBC and the WBA. Of course, Yoka is now the full WBA champion, considering the fact that he just recently knocked out Stan Kiatnawat on the New Year's Eve Japan card. And, I think that'd be a solid fight. Other than that, there's, the other champions out there. You've got Dani Nietes looking to fight for the now vacant IBF flyweight title fairly soon. Because recently vacated by Jonmil Casimiro, who's finding it really difficult to make 112, so he's looking to move up to 115. So Nietes is going to be fighting fairly soon against Iktawan Koktangbori, and you got Zhou Shiming for the WBO champion, of course. Zhou Shiming, I don't imagine is going to be his team, and Bob Arum and them aren't going to be in any hurry to fight the likes of a Churritos or a Nioka, unless it becomes really like a truly financially viable fight. And if anything, I'd say Ioka is probably on the better side of that risk versus reward equation than Hernandez is, just by virtue of he's a big money draw in Japan, the second biggest draw after Naoya Inoue in Japan. He's got a big name. His uncle was a world champion as well. He's been a pretty big star in Japan for pretty much the last decade now. But as for Hernandez, I mean, just a really solid job for him. It'll be really interesting because should Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez happen to move back down to 112 pounds, the man that he'll have to fight in order to regain his own title is now Juan Churritos Hernandez. And, in spite of the fact that I think that Chocolatito would most likely win that fight, Hernandez still, as I've mentioned before, has a similar style to Quadras, but without the same level of velocity. He's not as big of a fighter. He's not as strong of a fighter. He's not quite as quick or as overall talented as Quadras. He's like a mini Quadras, although not quite at the same level of overall technique and ability. But still, that's not really necessarily a knock on him, because I'd still say that, especially with this performance, he's definitely one of the top flyweights in the world now. And it'll be interesting to see how he goes about it. It's looking like his next opponent might wind up being Daigo Higa, who is 12-0 with 12 knockouts, a bit of a knockout artist in Japan, proving himself to be probably the top Japanese prospect in the flyweight divisions. Or there's also Muhammad Wasim, a fighter from Pakistan who actually fights out of South Korea, but also fights out of the Mayweather gym. He's trained by Jeff Mayweather, a really interesting fighter who's managed to become, I believe he's the WBC silver champion. I think he became the silver champion in only like 4 or 5 fights too. Bit of a prodigy there. He's managed to advance pretty quickly. Although he is about 30 years old or 29 years old, if I'm remembering correctly. And so he's one of these guys that he turned pro late, but he has a lot of experience, it seems to draw from, and a pretty good skill set. And I think fights with either Higa or Wasim would be excellent fights for Hernandez. The flyweight division is definitely looking to be a little bit back on the come up. You got Brian Valoria still out there. You got McWilliams Arroyo still out there, who would make for excellent opposition. You got Francisco Rodriguez Jr., Chihuas, Rodriguez, former unified 105-pound champion. Playing his trade there. I think he'd be a pretty solid opponent for Hernandez as well. But Hernandez's overall skill set and just the speed and the trickiness of him, I think, is going to be really difficult for pretty much any